Welcome, everybody, as we begin our last test review for this school year. This does not mean, however, that we are doing any more work after this final test this week, but rather uh, this is the last test over any material that we've studied. We will do other things throughout the rest of the school year, but we just simply won't have a big unit test over them. So let's not waste any more time, and let's begin looking at World War I, and specifically the main causes for the start of World War I in Europe. So militarism stands for the M in main, meaning that there was a buildup of militaries in countries in Europe. The alliance system, where countries sort of like picking your players for dodgeball or baseball or whatever it is, whatever sport you're playing, and people or countries pick the ones that for their team that they think will help them win. And so the alliance system is like that: countries picking other countries that will help them win and defeat other enemy countries. Imperialism, expansion of empires to other parts of the world. And finally, nationalism, an intense patriotic devotion to your country. So main causes of the start of World War I in Europe. What were the Lutz causes for the U.S. entry into World War I in 1917? So the acronym that we use for this is Lusitania. Lusitania, the sinking of the passenger ship that carried about 128 Americans on it and about 1,200 other citizens on it. Sunk by a U-boat, a German U-boat, in what was called unrestricted submarine warfare. Ties to Britain, our long ties to Great Britain that go back to the early 1600s. And so we have a much more favorable relationship with Great Britain, beginning with the founding of the 13 colonies, than we have with Germany at the time that this war started. The Sussex Pledge, the promise that Germany made to not sink any more ships. They had been sinking thousands of ships, many of them carrying innocent civilians, and they promised never to do that again with their U-boats. And of course, they broke that promise, and they sunk a French ship, and that just moved the United States one step closer to declaring war, getting involved in war with Germany. And finally, the Zimmermann telegraph, which was a telegraph to Mexico, encouraging Mexico to invade the United States if the United States does in fact join the Allied powers against Germany in World War I. So what was the spark that caused this major global this major global conflict in 1914? And that was the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand in Serbia. So an assassination triggered this major global conflict. During what years did World War I occur? 1914 to 1918. That's what they occurred in the years they occurred in Europe. But of course, the United States did not enter the war until 1917. Which weapon caused a stalemate during World War I? And this weapon certainly had on display the might and the power of the Industrial Revolution, and that was the machine gun. What type of regiments did African Americans fight in, or what group of men did African Americans fight alongside? And those were segregated regiments, which, just like in the Civil War, just like they will do again in World War II, they fight in all black regiments. They are not allowed at this time to fight alongside white soldiers. What was the name of the treaty that ended World War I? And that treaty was Versailles. Treaty of Versailles. What led to such a high death toll in World War I? And again, the negative side of the Industrial Revolution was the advancement in incredible weapons of warfare. And you saw that in the Modern Marvels video, where you saw the various weapons that were created: tanks, flamethrowers, gas masks, machine guns, all sorts of stuff that were used to wreak havoc. What was the Selective Service Act? This was a draft of young men for the military forces. We don't have a Selective Service Act any longer that drafts young men into the military. That Selective Service Act actually ended after the Vietnam War in 1973. But for most of the 20th century, men were drafted into the service, especially during wartime. All right, the 1920s. What was the most popular form of home entertainment during the 1920s? And that came from the radio, where families would literally pull up a chair and sit around the radio. And these radios were quite large. They were several feet tall in many cases, big console radios. Of course, you could only hear what was going on, listen to programs as they were acted out on radio, some programs that would later on become television shows. But at this time, family listened to popular programs on radio. And that's how they not only heard news, but were also entertained. What's another name for the 1920s? The Jazz Age. And of course, there are others like the Roaring Twenties. What was one of the most popular actors, who was one of the most popular actors during the 1920s? And that was Charlie Chaplin. He was a leading star in many what were called silent films. Silent because you could not actually hear the actors and actresses speaking. That creating movies where sound was included hadn't been developed yet. So what happened was that kind of like subtitles were put on the screen that told you what the actors and actresses were saying, but you could not actually hear their voices. What is Amelia Earhart famous for? The first female pilot to fly solo or alone across the Atlantic Ocean. The period of widespread economic and social change was called the Roaring Twenties. So another name for the 1920s. What is a flapper? Women that sported a rebellious style during the 1920s. Frequently, they cut their hair real short in what were called bob haircuts. They wore much shorter dresses. They smoked, drank alcohol. Many got jobs outside of the home. Did things that were really uncharacteristic for women. Certainly in previous time periods, especially for their parents, for their mothers and grandmothers. What was the movement called that was developed in New York City neighborhood by African American artists and musicians? And that was the Harlem Renaissance. The Harlem Renaissance. Renaissance meaning rebirth. What did the 21st Amendment do? Well, during right before the 1920s, the 18th Amendment was passed, which made it illegal to manufacture, consume, or sell alcohol. And the 21st Amendment took away that amendment. So one amendment made the other amendment no good, made it null and void. So it repealed or took away the 18th Amendment, which prohibited alcohol. All right, so what brought an end to the Roaring Twenties? And that is the stock market crashed. The stock market crashed. All right, we are now on the next section of the Great Depression. And of course, if you're following along on your test review, this is number 19. What was the Great Depression? A long and severe decline in the economy that existed from 1929 until the early 1940s. And of course, decline is misspelled. That should be an E at the end. But a long and severe decline in the economy that existed from 1929 until the early 1940s. What was the name of President Roosevelt's program to end the Great Depression? And it was called the New Deal. In what year did the stock market crash? 1929. So right at the end of the Roaring Twenties. List 6 causes of the Great Depression. 1 was overproduction of goods. 2, uneven distribution of income, meaning that a few people have a lot of money and a lot of people have little money. Number 3, stock market frenzy. People are going crazy investing in the stock market, risking their money, risking their life savings, their investments. And when the stock market crashes, they lose 100% of everything that they've ever owned. Number 4, just bad real estate deals. Number 5, shaky banking and debt. So, banking practices that loaned money to people that simply could not pay the debt back. And they get even further in debt. And when people can't pay back their debts, then banks don't have any money in their bank to circulate. And extended credit. Giving credit to people that, or people putting more things on credit and not being able to pay that credit back. So really getting overextended in the debt that they owe and having no money to pay back all the things that they put on credit. In what part of the country did the Dust Bowl occur? In the Great Plains. What was Social Security? An insurance system funded by the United States federal government to help support disabled or retired Americans. And we still have this system today. Which New Deal program helped American farmers? The Agricultural Administration Act, AAA. What name was given to the tent cities and shanty towns that emerged throughout the U.S. during the Great Depression? And they were named after the president at the time that was in office when the stock market crashed, and that was President Hoover, and so those shanty towns were called Hoovervilles. All right, World War II. What is island hopping? The military strategy to gain military bases and secure the many small islands in the Pacific. What happened on December 7th, 1941? The Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor. What 2 Japanese cities did the United States drop atomic bombs on that ended World War II? Nagasaki and Hiroshima, or Hiroshima. What is D-Day? The surprise attack on June 6, 1944 on Normandy, France to liberate or free Western Europe. And this ultimately leads to the defeat of Adolf Hitler and Nazi Germany. What is VE Day? Europe was liberated when Germany surrendered to the Allies May 8, 1945. What is VJ Day? Japan was forced to surrender on August 14, 1945, following the bombs that were dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. What country did Germany invade on September 1st, 1939, that started World War II in Europe? And that was Poland. All right, if you have any questions about anything in this test review, please do not hesitate to contact me. Also, spend some time reviewing your quizzes. This is our last test. It's 35 questions long. I forget which. And finish the year strong. This is the end of the year, and I want everybody to give it their best effort and to finish on a strong note. All right, everybody, take care, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.